Before we get started, I want to share a quick word from our sponsor, Logify. If you've been thinking about building your own direct booking channel and reducing your reliance on the OTAs, stay tuned. Because later in this episode, I'll be sharing a genuinely great offer that's only available until the end of April. You don't want to miss this. This is the Vacation Rental Success Podcast, keeping you up to date with news, views, information and resources on this rapidly changing short-term rental business. I'm your host, Heather Bayer, and with 25 years of experience in this industry, I'm making sure you know what's hot, what's not, what's new, and what will help make your business a success. Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Vacation Rental Success Podcast. This is your host, Heather Bayer, and as ever, I'm super excited to be back with you once again. Over the last few months, if you've been listening to this for a while, you know I've shifted almost 100% into AI conversations, and I'm loving it. And I've got a conversation lined up for you today that I think a lot of people have been waiting for, whether they know it or not. And we talk about AI on the show every week, as I said. We talk about agents, we talk about automation. And yet, if I'm being honest, I've spoken to a lot of property managers, and I'll put myself in that camp too, who would struggle to give you a clean, confident definition of what an AI agent actually is, or what one would do in a property management business. My guest today is Alex Zemianek. And Alex is a founder and CEO of JZ Vacation Rentals. I would call it JZ, but we'll stick with the American pronunciation of JZ in St. Louis, which has grown into a dual model business with about 70 full service managed homes and a curated luxury OTA representing close to 2,000 properties across 14 states and 3 countries. And what makes Alex the right person for this conversation is that he's not a technical operator. He didn't come into this industry as an engineer. He's built what he's built by paying attention, by asking the right questions and organizing his business so well that AI could actually do something useful inside of it. And it's the last part is the part that most people skip. And it's the part we're going to dig into today, along with a lot of other discussion on my favourite topic, AI. Let's get into it. I am just so delighted to have Alex Zemianek here with me today to talk about AI, because that's all we ever talk about on this podcast these days. But this is going to be an awesome discussion because we'd already spent 15 minutes in green room talk and getting into deep stuff. So I had to press the record button so I could welcome him in and you could hear it too. So welcome, Alex. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much, Heather, for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I don't know how we hadn't crossed paths before, but we met at a Breezeway Elevate panel just recently, just a few weeks ago, in fact. And we got into the geeking about AI bit, and we've had another discussion since then. And it was a no-brainer to have you back on here and to talk about this and to teach me some things, because there's a lot that I need to learn. But I'd love to start with introducing you to my audience, some of whom I know will probably know you very well from other conferences, but there may be many who haven't met you yet. So who is Alex Zemianek, and what do you do? And how did you get into this business?
Again, thanks for having me, and great job on the pronunciation. You nailed that. Yeah, so I will start with, I'm Alex Zemianek. I'm CEO and founder of JZ Vacation Rentals and also JZ Properties, so basically JZ brand. JZ, just to start there, is essentially initials, 3 generations of initials that I started after my late father, who passed when I was 20. And so I basically honor him every day. So it's become a brand. And I've been in real estate for now almost 20 years. I started more after Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I found out my dad had a passion for real estate. And then a friend told me about Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I read that in 3 days. And that kicked me on my whole REI journey. And I was not much of a reader. So it was very exciting for me to learn investing, passive income, how money is supposed to work for you. And so that's really how I got into the whole real estate business. Then I got news of my son. He's coming up on 12, so it's been a little over 12 years ago, and had an extra set of furniture. And we ended up taking that furniture to a house we were rehabbing and left my bachelor pad furniture at this apartment we were in, and tried to rent an apartment furnished back then, and I couldn't get a bite. And so a friend of mine from Miami told me about Airbnb, and that's how this whole story came about. And so then I learned that I could get more income in that method, and we just kept it moving. And I was inspired very early on by this website, luxuryretreats.com. And they're not around anymore because Airbnb acquired them somewhere around $300 million, I believe, and many years ago, and then created Airbnb Lux. We wanted to be freestanding I was inspired, I should say this. I was inspired at the fact that this website was completely independent of travel agents. They didn't use travel agents or really need travel agents because they had already established a brand where their entire site was them. So I thought that was really interesting because when I was coming on, it was all Airbnb. It's all Airbnb talk and Verbo and how do you grow distribution. And so we've really set out to go this hybrid route of being both a listing site. So we have about 2,000 properties now in 153 cities that are curated, that are very hand selected, that are basically other brands and property managers that list on our site in other cities and countries. And then from a management perspective, we manage mostly in Missouri and Colorado and grow into other areas, but that's our primary areas of where we're at.
So how many properties do you have under management?
Properties under management, we're at about 70, and we have another hotel coming on this summer. And so now we've last year which will lead into the AI conversation, but last year we really buckled down on our internal operations, our internal AI, as I like to call it, and really just brewing up a foundation for the growth. That's a whole nother landscape. And I really wasn't focused on adding properties at all. I think we added maybe just a few because they were already in the pipeline, but no sales, no outreach, no attempts whatsoever. And we dropped pretty significantly on our COGS and on our expenses and grew 168% of our bottom line just from doing that. And so we're primarily focusing now on the boutique hotels and adding resorts and trying to really just attack the branding model.
Awesome. Now, you've mentioned AI, and I wanted to step back with this and get a little bit more history too, because I know you have said before, you're not a technical person. It didn't come that naturally, and you fell into the AI world. What happened? Give us that moment.
Yeah. So number one, I didn't go to college. I tried to, but I just didn't really make it. I was more like a Van Wilder in college, and I had to, after losing my father, really, that's when I really started to take my life seriously. But I didn't have that technical background, just the hard knocks and diving in head first and a whole lot of failure. When I first left AT&T, I worked at the corporate world for about 12 years and climbed the corporate ladder, and it was all leadership and sales. And I didn't really know much about marketing when I got into vacation rentals, and I got schooled by losing a lot of money and figuring out the right ways to market, the wrong ways to market. And so that's how it was for me with AI a little bit too, but I definitely did not have a tech background. I used to call my brother if I had a printer issue, anything related to my computer, I did not know how to do before because I was always sales, leadership, culture building, turnover. That was what I spent most of half of my life doing. When it comes to anything tech, I think I learned over the years with vendors and getting under the hood, and I've always been really passionate about the integrations. I seem to get on a lot of the tech stack panels that used to be tech stack panels and now are just AI panels. And I was always fascinated by the digital plumbing in which each company talks to each other, which we all call integrations in our world. So how companies integrate, what that means. But before the landscape that we're in now, it was you get to 80% of your needs with maybe that's a property management software or any kind of vendor. And then you start looking around for the other 20%. And that's always been a difficult landscape to be in because you either have to jump ship, pack your bags, go over to a new vendor, whether that's a locking system or whoever that is, or a PMS system. And it's a whole lot. And so when AI first really hit me, obviously it came out, I think, many years ago, but in 23 is when it really started to take off because of ChatGPT launch and OpenAI. And then I had a conference. This was an IMN conference last year at the beginning of the year, where I was leading a tech stack panel. We bridged the top of AI. And we talked about it in our panel, but a friend of mine, Valerie Budd, nudged me to go into a roundtable session, a mastermind session after that was all around AI. And I'm so glad I did, because I walked in there thinking what a lot of people still think today, which is very transactional. And I would compare it. The best thing that I can say for your audience is Alexa to me now. I had to turn it off too, because I knew I might give an Alexa analogy. It was like, it is, even my kids don't like the Alexas anymore in my home because they've started using AI for the way that it can be used today. It's very much like this transactional relationship. You ask a question, you get an answer. You have to ask the right question to get the right answer. And so I walked into this conference thinking that I knew what AI was and I had it write things for me and content writing. And I walked out learning that it could actually do a whole lot of workflows and things for me that will remove my time, not just me having to transactionally ask for it.
That's brilliant. Okay, so you walked out of that conference. What did you do? Because so many of us do this, we walk away and it's just, you sit on the airplane going back home and you're just so full of these ideas. But then by the time you land and you get home and get back into the date, it's like going on vacation, isn't it? You forget your vacation the day after you get home. But you didn't forget about AI.
No, I actually went down a very long rabbit hole of the entire year, and it just emerged not long ago, but it was so fascinating to me. And I think what really struck me, because yes, I spent the entire plane ride home learning and downloading different apps and really starting to understand what it can do. And I just really just ran with the tips that I left with and just kept it moving. But what really struck me is when I realized that, so I'm a reader and I like book Traction. Yeah. Traction is phenomenal. The whole rocks analogy, I love that. I love the rocket fuel where you're integrator, visionary. That landscape has shifted because I'm a visionary, but I think normally and naturally, but because I worked for AT&T for so long, that coaching rhythms and all of the coaching psychology and things that we were very structured into, I can be an integrator. But for a lot of people, if you're a visionary, you usually need an integrator to help push your ideas along. And either way, it's very difficult to sell your visions. So the thing that struck me the most is that now every single visionary can literally talk their ideas into fruition on the same minute, same hour, and same day. I'll give you an example outside of our work that I just did 2 nights ago. My son is huge in soccer. And so we got this AI trace camera and this subscription that will now, you put it up high and it'll track the whole game. It'll put a halo around your child and it'll track them and it'll give you all these insights. It's really cool. I had tryouts and I had all of these things that I'm trying to pull all these videos and all these clips together in a short period of time so I can send it into a club. It was trying to brainstorm some ideas and I was giving, again, the pain of my situation and what I'm trying to accomplish and the time that I have. Long story short, I ended up developing an entire video editing app while I was sleeping. I didn't do any of it. I don't know how to do any of it, but I know how to prompt. I know how to be very clear and intentional in the directions now of what I'm looking for. And then I know how to sit back and guide and then audit and just have AI do all the work. So that was to fast forward all the way to now. I'm building apps and doing software and things for lots of problems, not just the ones that are in our industry, but the ones that are outside. So the first thing that I did is take a very big deep dive, studied as much as I could, played around with it. I tried real hard to refrain from going back and dumping my team with all of the things that I learned, because I think every one of us that goes to a conference and leaves, you have the excitement and energy of the conference, but your team doesn't always. So you have to be very careful what you come back and just explode them with.
Well, this sounds all very exciting. And I love the idea of the video app, but lay it out for me. Tell me the story. For a start, what are you using to do this? And you talk about prompting. I think a lot of us and a lot of my listeners are thinking a prompt is something you say, I've got a car to sell. Can you give me a spec to put on Facebook Marketplace? That's what they think a prompt is. So let's just pare this down a little bit and do a sort of a step-by-step approach.
I love it. Okay, so let's say you're a new user. and you're not really sure where to start. That's a big question that I get all the time, and that's one that I had. The first thing that you got to realize is that AI can become an expert in just about every field and every single thing in subject matter. It already has almost 1 billion users using it every single week. So that's a whole lot of information that's being fed into it. So it has a memory system and data that it can collect. The first thing that you want to do is just understand the true way to delegate is not so far off of how we talk to our employees or just delegating to humans. Delegating is like prompting. Okay. So just those two words are very similar. When you prompt, instead of trying to wait until you figure out what to ask, what to say, what to do, what to tell it, you're prompting, you have 3 goals. Okay. So what is its role? What is the role of the AI chat agent or whatever you're talking to? If you're using ChatGPT, for example, ChatGPT is a chat. If you're chatting with ChatGPT, you want to give it its role, its goal, what it's trying to accomplish, and your pain. So instead of trying to say you are a developer, you're an expert developer, you're an architect, the goal is to get this blueprint revised or figured out, and I need you to do X. Instead of saying, I need you to do anything, it's here's my pain. Here's the issue that I'm having. Where do I start? And then you would be blown away by how much you will get done by just starting there. Even if I failed to teach prompting on this podcast, you can go right to AI and say, teach me how to prompt. What do I need to do? And I'm going to give you one more tip that's helped me along the way too. This has been a really powerful one. It's so simple, but man, does it work really well. Instead of, again, trying to always give the goal, give the role, give the perfect prompt, write the perfect prompt. I personally am not the greatest writer. I can do it. I write lots of emails all day long, less and less now. But I would much rather talk or dictate. It's much easier to get my visions, my pain. Sometimes it's just venting and I just need to get it. So a lot of the times what happens when we start using anything, number one, we're skeptical of it. We don't really trust it, or we just don't know what to do. We don't know what to ask. So, and what I have witnessed with my own team and friends and family and other people that I'm talking with, we jump to these conclusions that we need to be more ready or that we need to understand it more before we use it. And it's actually quite the opposite. By using it, you're going to understand it and you'll get a lot better at it. And more importantly, AI will teach you. It will teach you how to use it. Right?
Just to stop you there, because I was talking with Claude yesterday about something and it stopped me halfway and said, hold on, you're doing what you always do, which is over-research. Spend too much, you want to learn everything we really want to start doing. And that really stopped me. I thought, oh my gosh, You really know me. Because I was overthinking. So I had Claude come back and say, you're overthinking.
That's powerful. I've had that same incident happen a lot where it's like, Alex, it's late. Like you can ship this tomorrow. I'm like, oh no, I'm well aware you're actually going to do it while I'm sleeping. So we're going to get this started still. I'm going to go to bed and I'll check on you again in the morning. But it will start to, I have realized that the more that it starts to learn your routines and your rhythms and also your pain points and the things that you express, and the more you start to tie together what I've been calling like a central nervous system and ecosystem, it changes the landscape of how everything that you're working with and functioning with in your life starts to interact and connect with one another.
Here's something worth considering. If you're still getting most of your bookings through Airbnb and Vrbo, you're giving away a significant chunk of every reservation in commission fees. And the more you grow, the more that matters. But here's what the hosts who are genuinely thriving right now have worked out. You can build your own booking channel, own your own guest relationships, and stop letting the platforms take their cut. That's exactly what Lodgify is built for. It's an all-in-one vacation rental platform. You get your own professional booking website, a channel manager that keeps Airbnb, Vrbo, and Booking.com all in sync, automated guest messaging, and a unified inbox so you're not bouncing between 6 different apps. Whether you've got one property or more, it makes running your business a great deal cleaner. And right now, through to April the 30th, you can get 60% off with code VRS60 on all their yearly and bi-yearly ultimate and professional plans. If you've been thinking about making this switch, it's a genuinely good moment to do it. Click in the show notes to get started. So we've got this prompting, you've got the role and the goal and the pain point. I want to just move on a little bit and just talk about AI agents, because you mentioned to me earlier on, I think probably in the green room before we started this, I spun up another agent, and I've heard people say this. And tell me what this means. There's very few clear definitions about what an agent is at the moment. A lot of people use it in different contexts. So what is it? What is it in a property management context? And how is it different from people just going into ChatGPT, and even if they're using the role, goal, pain model?
Love it. Yeah, so the chat interface, and when you're just going to ChatGPT, to start there, it's going to be very transactional. You get questions, you get work things done. You can ask it to do something, it will do that thing for you. Whereas an agent can do multiple steps, it can do multiple things, and it can actually think and reason and make a shift in its direction based on its knowledge, memory, training, just like an employee would. So agent, and what is now we're shifting into this era of agentic AI, basically means that it is going to do things a little bit more autonomously. In our world, an example of that would be the automations that we have. It would be like a first step into understanding what an agent can do, because it's a if this, then that. But those are very clear guidelines where it always has to be very bulleted and clear, whereas an agent is going to have a similar instruction like that, where it's going to automate things and do them automatically, trigger out this email every time a booking comes in, do this every time this happens, 3 days before a guest checks in, do this. It takes that a step further, and it can actually think through those flows, and it can do more than just that commanded question or whatever that is. Going back to the Alexa analogy, and Alexa right now would not be considered an agent because it's very transactional, right? And so it can look up things for you. It can give you an answer for the things. But if an Alexa was an agent, the way that it would sound, and I would assume they probably have this model now coming out or something similar to this, then you could say, hey, Alexa, I'm going to be hosting a gathering this Friday. I need you to prepare the home. Okay. And so that's all I said, right? That's a pretty short prompt. And then Alexa then looks at your calendar because it has access to it, right? And it says, okay, what's going to conflict on the calendar? It's thinking like we would and planning ahead. And it's going to go, okay, let's set the thermostat. Let's play some music. What kind of music? Let's start to adjust that environment. Let's look at the grocery list. Matter of fact, we're connected to the refrigerator. Let's look at what's inside the refrigerator. And it starts to do things because it can connect and it can think and reason, and it has a little bit more availability than just your prompt, your words, or your instruction. Does that help?
It does, but I'd like you to share maybe a use case, a simple use case for a property manager. And also come into, how do you start this? Are you starting this in ChatGPT? Are you doing it in Claude? And if you're in Claude, are you doing it in Chat or Cowork or Code? Where do you begin?
I love it. So I'll just tell my history. So I started with ChatGPT because that was like the Airbnb of our industry, right? It really blew up from a marketing perspective. Now I use Claude a lot more, but I started with ChatGPT. And then I remember when I revisited another IMN about midway through last year. And by that point, on the way there, on the flight there, ChatGPT agent mode came out, which basically gave another mode where it will essentially, again, do autonomous work for you. It can send emails for you. It can pull up things, and it can load a browser on your screen. I thought that was very cool, and I started to use that a lot and build things. But then I started to get more into Claude Code and started to use Claude Desktop and learn how APIs and some of those things work. But the other use case that I can say right now, like I have, for example, about 8 agents now. And so an agent in real practice, a marketing agent, we'll just go with that one. A marketing agent right now I have do all WordPress because it can go into the back end of WordPress and connect, and it can check for 404s, and it can do things, all this technical SEO that marketing agencies have told me for years are not that important. And it's important, but not that important. It's very important now because AI can scan and it can do all of these things in Google and the way all that's going to work. But one agent to go and do my WordPress, I have that same marketing agent is connected to Google Analytics. It's connected to all my reporting. So now I can brainstorm with the same agent from an intel standpoint because it can pull all that data. And then the same agent that's giving me the data is also learning the data. It knows the history of the data. It knows my pain points, my goals, and what I'm trying to accomplish, which then becomes its goals. And so it can connect to all of these marketing systems, whether that's sending your email marketing for you, doing your ad work, your Google Ads. You can connect it to every single one of those systems. So once it is connected, whether that is through ChatGPT, Claude, or whatever system you have, then it's basically now all of these systems talk to one another. And so that I would say the first start is to get comfortable with the agents that are already available today. Instead of having to jump to building anything custom or doing anything on your own, that would be like a next phase. But the first phase, ChatGPT has the agent mode. That is one very quick, available solution to where you can have autonomous work being done immediately.
It took me a while to get into this idea of almost, and we were discussing before about Jordan Wilson's latest, or one of the latest episodes called 7 Sins, which I would encourage anybody to listen to. But one of these is losing domain skills, losing the expertise, because I find myself now thinking, I don't have to think about this, I just have to ask Claude. So I could go into Claude and say, okay, I want to set up a marketing agent. I want to set up a marketing agent to do A, B, C, D, E. Tell me how I do it step by step. I don't have to go out and learn. It will tell me step by step. I'm doing it right now because finally getting into using Notion. And I didn't quite understand how to get my Notion set up and how databases work. So every morning for an hour, I do tutorials with Claude. And I say, okay, step by step, tell me this. And it goes, okay, go into a Notion, do this, click this, take a screenshot, come back and show me what you've got. And
Love that.
then I've got the screenshot and it says, okay, that really worked. But I did notice while I was on that page that this isn't working so well. So to a degree, it's fantastic. To the 98% is fantastic. But there is that little bit at the end where I'm thinking, am I giving away my brain?
Yeah, no, that's real. And I think it's going to be very difficult for developers, especially in any tech world, our world, any world, where you've built this programmer skill. Maybe you went to college for it. Maybe you've done it for most of your life. I had a mentor that helped me a little bit along this way where he would pop in. He was actually a contractor. And he was one of the smartest contractors I've ever worked with. His blueprint, everything that he gave me is detail. It was next level. And I learned that he's been coding since he was 8 years old. And he's also been vibe coding, which is a little bit different, right? With natural voice, which is, I guess, what we do. And he's been doing that for the last 3 to 5 years. So he's a pro in both, which I have not seen yet. Usually when I interact with people, they're either 20, 30 years in development and now learning how to do it with AI, which is a transition. It's difficult because it slows them down. They trust less because they can do some of these things themselves. So naturally, they're going to just jump to doing some of the coding way and do some of it the vibe coding way, which if that were to stay the case, I could beat an entire room of developers in coding something and building an app because it's not me, because it is Claude Code or it's my favorite coding agent or a 12 of them that are working through the night and don't sleep and don't stop. And so that is a real thing of having to, one, make sure that developers that are a little bit more tech savvy are learning that. The other thing is knowing the percentage rule. When you talk to a law office, they will hopefully tell you that 80% of what they do now, the 80% is the start. And then they always do the remaining 20%, hopefully, because that you cannot trust the output. You still have to have a human in the loop at the end. But the problem is some people are still trying to do the 80, right? And then they're using the 20 for AI. They're trying to figure out 80% of what needs to happen because we want to have all the answers before we start something. Well, I'll give you a workflow example that I have set up now that has been really powerful for me. So I now have this auto system, one of my agents, my CEO assistant agent, connected to my email, my calendar, a call, all transcriptions, every call that I have. It reviews that every single day and provides me a summary in the morning. In the morning, I wake up, all of the unread emails already have a drafted response. So it's not sending the emails for me because I don't trust that yet. And I'm still doing some edits and I really want it to still be personable. And so I want to still add intros and outros. But the point is it does 80% of that work that might be 4 hours, 5 hours, whatever the amount of time is. It chops a lot of that down to where I can still have the trust. I can still inspect, but just like delegating to an employee, they're doing the majority of it. And then you follow up to inspect what you expect, right? So the same thing with AI. And the other thing that I'll say is like for anybody in construction or just if you ever hired a contractor, you don't always take the first bid, right? Like you want to get multiple bids and then you compare the bids and then you take what most people are saying and then you run with that. That's how I learned construction too. It was really no different. It's just leveraging multiple trades to give you an answer and then taking the highest commonality of that. And that's probably going to be the right direction to go. That's the same way that AI works. Another example in prompting that I think is important. I used to try to write out all the long prompts. Okay, so I'm going to write this long roll and then the pain. I didn't always know that part, but let's say I did and I wrote all that out. That still takes a little while and I probably still wouldn't do it as good as AI can do it. So now what I do is I just puke it all out in raw form in a dictate manner. I just record what I'm saying. Some of you might be a writer and you might be better at just writing the prompt. Some of you might think better when you're taking a walk and you're on your natural, normal routine or your walk, you're out in nature and you're thinking, your visions are coming in your head, but you want to get them into fruition. You can speak just your pain. You can speak what's the goal and what's the role. And you're going to ask this AI chat agent, whatever you're talking to, it could be ChatGPT, just grab a chat and reuse it every single time. I want you to be an expert prompt writer. I want you to research all the 2026 tips of what to write. And then you puke out all of your stuff. It will write you the perfect prompt. You take that and you paste that into the next chat or interface. And then it will do a lot better job because AI wrote it.
Awesome. I remember when I was down in Alabama for the winter and walking with the dog every single morning. And I would just talk to ChatGPT every day, talk to Lucy and say, okay, if I've got an idea for a LinkedIn post. I've got an idea for a new product. Yeah, go ahead. Tell me what the idea is. And then I would you said puke. Mine is just brain dump. Stream of consciousness, just drop it as I'm walking. And then if I looked at the transcript, I get this, hey, Britta, put that down as I'm yelling at the dog. But she would come back and say, okay, what would you like me to do with this? I'd like a LinkedIn post. And then I got into okay, I'm letting AI write my LinkedIn post. I didn't think so because years ago, going back 40 years or so, I worked for Reader's Digest. And I worked in their customer service department. And I used to dictate day in, day out, dictate letters that would be sent out to unhappy customers. And that dictation would go to the typing pool. And they would type it up, but they would also edit it. And they would put that edit into the company speak. So if I had dictated, but it didn't really sound like Reader's Digest, they would make those changes. And I'm thinking, this is no different. It's still my voice. But the other thing is, and I want to lead into this now, is what you have in the background, because this is what I'm talking about at conferences coming up is, and you've said this recently, you've got to have those organized systems in the background. The AI has to know your foundation, your tone, your brand guidelines, everything about you, your company. And I think back to 40 years ago at Reader's Digest, they had all those things, but it was very manual.
Yes.
And that typing pool, they were working from those guidelines. And they were taking my voice and just adapting my voice, and my tone went with it as well, but making sure it was in the right voice. Now we have AI to do that for us. So I'm not sure how I got into that, but it was going to be my next question, was about these organized systems that you have to have as your foundation? Because I know you've talked about this yourself recently.
Yeah. So you think about us, just us as humans for a minute, where how it's so inefficient and it slows us down when we don't have a good cloud system, a file cabinet system. Started out as a file cabinet system, right? Now it's an online file cabinet, a cloud file system, which could be Google Drive as an example. So when I realized that like Google Drive was basically going to be my company's brain, it's that way for us as humans when we need to go find a file. If you looked at our guest support, or we'll call it our support folder, which is a shared folder, months ago, we had owner support, then another subfolder, owner support AZ, owner support Nico. We stopped trusting what is even organized anymore. So you start naming them and putting all these different dates on them. And it got so far out of hand. Even for us, that slows us down. But when I really started to realize how AI works and how it will, ChatGPT, for example, you just used to communicate directly with the chat. And then they added what was called connectors. And connectors are basically apps, right? And they've changed the name multiple times. But that basically means that it can integrate with Slack. It can integrate with Gmail. It can integrate with your Google Calendar as a connector or as an app. And then it can go grab information from that, or it can even do information. So it used to be read only. Just tell me what's on my Asana, or tell me what was in Slack, what was discussed in Slack. It's been able to do that for a while. Now it can actually send messages and it can do more actionable things because of that connection. So once you learn these things, then you realize that organizing your data is totally your foundation. And so when we started to manually, again, this is my mistake, of manually going and one by one trying to fix these folders, and that was weeks to get one folder. And then I went to AI again with my pain point and then got that first lesson of it. So why don't I do that? Well, how about I just give you a wireframe, show you everything of where your drive is today, and then I'll make the suggestions and then you can approve. And I'm like, was easier. And so now we have a very organized system that all has, it's look at scraping. It can go and scrape that data and grab that data a lot faster when you have all of that data and all that system organized. Let me give you one that is probably a good workflow that you could do right today. So if you're like me and you have a lot of meetings, you have a lot of calls, and you have a lot of things that are said and things to remember, that's my biggest pain point. I spend a lot of time on web calls, and then you have little time for the execution. And so organizing all of the things that are said and your commitments and ideas, sometimes it's just ideas you want to grab. By having a transcriber, when I started out with Fireflies or any of the regular transcribing tools, they're very sophisticated and they're great and they give you a lot of information, but they don't do it for you. That's the problem, right? So they will summarize your commitments. They'll summarize all of these things that were talked about, but they don't actually have the next step to implement the work. Whereas when you build, let's say you build your Google Drive system, like I have every meeting go into one folder. And then I have every pod recording, which is my meetings on the fly, go in another folder that I want it to go in. So every time I meet with an employee, every time I meet with a vendor or anyone that I'm having those conversations with, then now I have all of that as a super memory, whether that's for brainstorming, whether that's for an automatic flow where it can deliver the information. So I will get a G chat, maybe I think it's 30 minutes before my meetings, and it will summarize the last meeting. It will look at my Asana, it'll look at my Gmail, and it'll look at my calendar, and it'll make sure that I'm aligned with what I need to be aligned with before I even go into that meeting. And so it's some of those things that can make a world of difference when you have the information organized, because then the next thing that it starts to lead into, which we now have, is a chat bot on Slack that we now call Merlin. We did a contest to name it, and the team's having a lot of fun with it. Merlin can answer more questions than I could. It knows our business quite well, but it didn't when we had 4 guest support folders.
Yeah, and I look back at my years as a property manager and how so much information lived in my head, and then it was in random files. It was in folders on shelves, and I still have some of those folders.
Yeah.
There was just so much in just random places. We now put everything that we have now is in Google Drive. But before that, there were bits in Dropbox. I'm sure I still have a whole bunch of stuff in Dropbox that I've totally forgotten about.
Yeah.
But I go along with absolutely everything you said. Having clean, organized systems with good file structure, good SOPs, that is your foundation. And for me, it's having business knowledge, what we call business DNA, is this is my business. This is what I think about it. This is how I want to be seen doing it. All that is in those folders. So I can pull it out and offer it to a large language model and say, look at this. That's
exactly right. When you think about just like, I like to talk about internal AI a little bit because everybody's talking external AI. Let's get a chat bot. Let's chop down the time communicating with guests, whatever that is, workflows. But I really saw this as an opportunity to help us truly efficiently organize inside our house and build and use and leverage AI in ways that make our team's life easier, to make their experience better. And when your team's experience is better, or your experience as an executive or a leader in your company, if it makes you faster and more efficient and better, because you can now recall more, you can now do a lot more and do a lot more things, then naturally your guest experience, your owner experience, and everything externally gets better too. And I just feel like there's been a lot of last several year focus on let's get more bots and let's get more automation, and keeping the soul in hospitality and keeping the connection has been important to me. So what I did is go on a mission to save $10,000 in a tech stack, for example, and then leveraged our monthly savings and went and hired a head of experience. Someone that is actually going to, our dedicated role is making sure that we never lose that we never lose that connection. And so the first touch and the end, the first call, the end call is always a human. Everything in between can be automated and make things easier and more efficient, but we don't want to lose that connection. So focusing on these things that make your life easier later is really supercharging it. The other thing we talked about, I think, on a couple other conversations is look at it as like onboarding. Just like an employee, you're going to onboard, whether that is an AI agent or an AI chat or project or whatever you're using. And you're going to onboard it by having it become the expert, whether that is on your data or something in the subject that you're wanting to learn about. So if you want it to become your marketing chat, your marketing agent, as you were saying, like you have these advisors, they become your advisors because they learn all of your data and all of your information and secrets. And then also because they can go to the web and they can learn the experts of the world, whether that's YouTube, transcriptions, you can send it to learn all of these things. So it goes through a little bit of an onboarding process first.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned my advisory board that I use, because I think we were discussing that before we came on air. And I just wanted to share that because you'd also mentioned Traction and Rocket Fuel, Gino Wickman's books. I have both of those downloaded as PDFs, and Gino Wickman is part of my board of advisors.
I love that so much.
So if I get stuck with something, particularly when it's more of an operational side and I can't figure out what am I going to do next quarter? What is the big goal for the next quarter? Then I will draw in, I've got a ton of advisors, from Alex Hormozy to, I can't think of the names now. Now I get excited about my board of advisors. I've totally forgotten their names.
Think about if you just had to go to Tony Robbins and you had it listened to and just pick a bunch of transcriptions and videos, and imagine the level of therapeutic knowledge that an agent would have by just doing that little exercise. Because what it won't do, if you just gave it a regular prompt and you just say you're asking it just a regular question, you're allowing AI to go choose where it pulls the sources from. And it'll tell you. It'll tell you where the sources are, and there's different models that will search longer. You can have the regular instant chat, which if you go to ChatGPT, you can see it'll say instant, or it'll say thinking, which means it's going to think a little bit longer. It's going to reason more. It's going to question itself. You can even read some of those things. But if you send it on a deep research, then it's going to go 10 minutes, maybe 5 minutes, whatever it is now. And then you can have it, yes, to your point, you can have it, whoever inspires you, whoever is somebody that you already learned from or a mentor, it's almost like you can ask that person direct questions almost every day. Is that how it feels for you?
Well, it is, because I've downloaded all my podcast episodes.
I love that. Yeah.
Because I've talked to, this one is going to be episode 661 or something, 661. So there's been probably at least 500, because I do some solos, but at least 500 interviews with some of the biggest brains in this industry. So I've downloaded all those podcasts, or I've put them into a bucket, and I can draw on the wisdom of Simon Lehman,
Yes.
Richard Vorton, so many of the people in this industry. I can draw on their wisdom because my AI repository, my repo, is there. It's always there helping me out. And I can just say, what would Simon Lehman say about this?
I love that so much. It's so powerful because it becomes a super memory. It becomes like a super brain for your company, for yourself. I have a personal and private folder that has all of my kids' stuff in it. It has all of their schedules, and I have all the emails that come from their schools go directly into a system. So then all I have to do is just either turn on voice mode, and I can now be on the road and I can be getting stuff done or asking questions with this super brain. Hey, what did we discuss in that call 2 years ago? Or what was said in that meeting? Or again, you can start to build these workflows where it's that in itself is really cool. Even just to have that transactional ability to be able to go and ask, hey, what would Simon do
Yeah.
on this situation? Because it has studied and learned and listened and absorbed all of this data and all of this information. And almost all of us or anyone that's listening has some sort of data. You have some sort of inside data, some inside knowledge, some things, whether that is just, maybe it's just your company policies and things that are in so many different places, and allowing AI to one, help you organize it and clean it up is the first step. And then the second step is then leveraging AI to leverage that information. And then if you want to go a little bit more advanced, then that's where you can start getting into building your own systems. You can build your own software, your own apps without ever even building it, just by knowing how to give clear direction and clear pain or goal or role.
We're going back to prompting again, and I think it's worthwhile saying that you don't have to sit there for half an hour trying to figure out how to frame a prompt. You can ask your AI to help you to frame the best prompt.
You sure can. I'll give you another example where the workflow and like having this data organized and then saving a prompt and just the speed. If this is fast forwarding, right? But just to give people an example, a friend of mine, Tyann Marsink, that called me up and said, Alex, we need a widget for legislation. I would write these templates with AI. I would write these templates that we both serve on Missouri Vacation Homes Alliance. It fights regulation, writing bills, and all the things. And you give 100 people a template that is written to the senator and it gives all the points and stuff, and it says, enter your name here. Probably 30 of those show up with enter your name here and still the same bracket. So that's not going to be as powerful as all these individual letters. So we looked into these tools. We looked at the cost. It's very expensive. Is this something that you think you could build? And I'm like, if you could just send me an audio of what you're needing, or we can leverage just what we're talking about on this call. She did. She sent me a 6-minute audio. I'm in between calls. I had about 3 minutes before I have to get on another call. I went to Claude Code. I just dictated real fast. I said, hey, I need you to go listen to the call I just had with a friend. I need you to also go to the download folder in my computer and look at the audio or listen to the audio and the transcription. Whatever she's looking for, whatever the pain point is, just go ahead and start speccing it and building the plan. By the time I got off the call, it had the whole plan, it had all the tasks. All I had to do is implement it. By the end of the day, I had a widget done and I had it built, and I didn't build any of it. I just had Claude Code, and I had the experience now and the mistakes to know that I didn't even really have to do a lot of the prompting, is why I brought this up. I'm now getting off calls and tapping into what was already discussed because the prompt is on the call. The whole specify or the plan is already discussed. And instead of me trying to take an hour-long vision and then regurgitate that on my own, I'm allowing AI to do that.
Yeah. For the person listening who's convinced after this conversation that they absolutely still don't know what to start with tomorrow morning, what's one thing you tell them, A, to stop doing? And secondly, what's the one thing you tell them to start doing?
You could start very simple. Stop overthinking, I should say that. Anything that you fear is usually because of uncertainty. Change is usually always going to be difficult for any of us. And so knowing that uncertainty causes that fear, then you could become more certain only one way. And that's by doing it. And that's by learning it. And that's by diving into it. And then I caution you, though, because when you take that dive, you might fall in a deep rabbit hole. Most people do. And you'll start, if you build one workflow, if you just did the transcript thing, where you might already be doing the transcripts and they join your call. And then you have this transcription afterwards. But if you're like me, you're like, okay, what do I do with that? And you don't always have the time to go read 40 of them. And so if you can have a system where you have your transcripts just go to one place, and then you can even transactionally just ask Claude or ChatGPT to go read those transcripts, you'll be blown away by the level of intel and brainstorming and actionable things that you can start to get done. So stop overthinking and then start trying to change the way that you prompt. Maybe leave today and say, I want to learn everything I can about prompting in 2026. That could be a very easy way to start.
Yeah, and you could do that in exactly the same way as I did with Claude with Notion. I need to start learning Notion. I want you to show me step by step how I do this. And you could do exactly the same. That's such a great start.
And be careful not to take just the first answer. And if you're on a free version, then it might be a year ago ability. Yep. If you're on a pro version, you might be a little bit more current. And if you're on the max, you're on the latest and greatest of what's available to everybody today. You don't always have to jump to the max. You can start with those versions. But if you start with a version that's not the highest model, then I just encourage you to leverage you can either leverage other AI or you can ask it multiple times just to make sure that you're not just accepting the first answer. What I've learned with some, and I got discouraged along the way too, when that one time where you trusted it and it backfired, it might discourage you from continuing. So just like going back to the contractor analogy, get 2 bids, get 3 bids is just one way to compare that.
That is such a great tip. And I know as someone who's gone from free to the $20 a month version to the max version, that things do change. The output does change.
It's significant. And the cost is nothing in comparison to the amount of tech stack that you can save. Sometimes I realize that we talk a lot about like our vacational tech stack. So I've been trying to remind people, like, write down all the tech that you wouldn't see in the vendor hall. Asana, Slack, Adobe, maybe that is DocuSign. We had so many. I didn't even realize it. There were over 30 at one point. And we've chopped that down to 15 and eventually we'll be at 5.
Yeah.
And then I'll only log into one interface and that's it. I don't really log into Gmail as much anymore other than to edit or audit once something is already done. I do it all out of Claude or all out of Claude's interface. So the cost, I think, is well worth it. But start somewhere. If you start with a free version, just know that you're limited. But you have to start somewhere.
Yeah. This has been great. Alex, just before we finish, do you think we're still on the cusp of all this?
Do I think what?
We are still on the cusp of all this. Are we just at the beginning or are we a long way through and people do have to catch up fast?
I think that it is already so far beyond what most people even realize it's capable of doing. I think that SaaS has forever changed. I wouldn't say SaaS has died. I think that SaaS will evolve very fast because once anyone on this call realizes that we're all developers already now, we all have the ability to develop you could have an app up and running within an hour if you just invested a little bit of time into learning those things. Mm-hmm. What that will do is massively change the landscape and the way that we can do things. So instead of waiting for another company, a vendor, a software company to develop this integration, you immediately have the ability to become the architect. You can architect anything in the way that you want. So now QuickBooks can now talk to another system that didn't integrate before. Asana talks to Slack, which talks to Gmail, which they're all interconnected into one playground, one ecosystem. So the fastest or easiest or best way to start is just getting comfortable. Mm-hmm. Start with something that is your biggest pain point. So if that is meetings, that's mine. If that's reporting for owners, we developed our own reporting system. Whatever that is, start with something that will remove your time and then take that extra time and reinvest it into learning more about it.
Alex, this has been just the best chat. And I know and I do hope there will be many more like this. And I'd love to have you back maybe in a couple of months' time and we can explore where we've got to over that time.
I would love to.
Yeah.
A lot will change in 2 months, so I'll come back anytime. Thank you so much for having me, Heather. I always have fun chatting with you.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure having you on. What a great conversation, Alex. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time and your thinking today. If you've listened so far, I want to give you one thing to take with you. Of everything Alex said in this episode, the part I hope sticks with you is the data organization point. Most of us, when we think about getting started with AI, just jump straight to the tools. Which one to buy, which one to try, which one everyone else is using. Alex has flipped that around, and I think he's right. The tools only work if the business underneath them is organized well enough for AI to do something useful. That's a grown-up operator's view of AI, and it's exactly the kind of practical grounding this industry needs more of. So you've heard me talking about the AI Ambassador program. It's a structured training for short-term rental operators who want to bring AI into their business responsibly, not reactively. So the second cohort opens in May, and if this episode has got you thinking that this is the year you stop dabbling and start doing, it's the place to start. I've made some substantial changes to this program since the first cohort, and that's because AI changes day by day, and I am incorporating those changes. So what you get is something that is really up to date. You can find everything at vacationrentalformula.com/AI. There's information about what's covered, who it's for, and how to get on the waiting list for the next cohort, and how to register. I'd like to take the final opportunity to thank Logify for their sponsorship of this episode. Don't forget to go check them out and see if you can take advantage of the amazing offer that they have on for you at the moment. So as ever, if you enjoyed this conversation, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. I'm sure there's plenty who need to hear it. And I don't ask this often, but if you've got a moment to leave a review on Apple's podcast or Spotify or anywhere else that you might listen to the podcast, it really genuinely helps this show reach the right people. So until next time, take care. Happy hosting. It's been a pleasure as ever being with you. If there's anything you'd like to comment on, then join the conversation on the show notes for the episode at vacationrentalformula.com. We'd love to hear from you, and I look forward to being with you again next week.